What burns isn't always a loss. Sometimes it's purification.
The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers as my phone buzzed against the concrete garage floor. I was underneath my beat-up Ford, trying to fix what the mechanic quoted me $800 to repair, when the notification lit up my screen like a neon sign advertising my personal hell. Thought you should see this, man. Sorry. Ray. The video started innocently enough. A college party, red Solo cups, typical Friday night chaos. Then I saw her. My wife Anne, 38 years old, and supposedly at her company retreat in Cleveland, grinding between two frat boys who looked young enough to be carted at a gas station. Her designer blouse, the one I bought her for our anniversary last month, was unbuttoned to her navel, and she was laughing like she hadn't in years, at least not with me. I watched my marriage implode in high definition as Anne disappeared into a bedroom with both guys, the camera following just long enough to catch her pulling one of them down on top of her, before someone mercifully cut the feed. Nothing says true love like your wife making the college highlight reel, I thought, crawling out from under the Ford and wiping motor oil on my jeans. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, literally under a piece of junk, while my wife was literally under a couple of pieces of something else entirely. My name is Jack Morrison, and up until 3 minutes ago, I thought I was married to a successful architect who worked late because she cared about her career. Turns out she worked late because she cared about working her way through Ohio State's alumni network. I called Ray back immediately. Where did you get this? Tommy Chen's kid goes to OSU. It's all over their social media. Jack, I'm sorry, but everyone's seen it. The whole damn town's talking. The whole damn town. Mill Haven, Ohio. Population 47,000 and roughly 46,999 people who had nothing better to do than gossip about their neighbor's business. I could already picture the conversations at Kowalski's diner tomorrow morning, the knowing looks at the grocery store, the way conversations would stop when I walked into a room. I'd lived in this Rust Belt city my entire life, watched it slowly decay as the steel mills closed and the young people moved away. But it was home, and Anne and I had built something here. Or so I thought. Our modest Victorian on Elm Street wasn't much, but I'd spent 5 years restoring it myself. New plumbing, refinished hardwood floors, a kitchen that belonged in a magazine. It was supposed to be our forever home. Now it felt like a museum dedicated to my own stupidity. Anne's car pulled into the driveway at 11:30 p.m., her BMW purring like a satisfied cat. I watched from the living room window as she stumbled slightly getting out, clearly drunk, her hair a mess and her clothes wrinkled. She'd probably been planning to sneak in, shower, and pretend she'd been sleeping when I got home from my late shift at the engineering firm. Except I'd called in sick and been here all evening, watching that video on repeat, and feeling my world crumble one pixel at a time. The front door opened with its familiar creak, another item on my endless honey-do list that would never get finished now. Jack, you awake? Her voice carried that fake sweetness she used when she was hiding something. I'd heard it a lot lately. In here, I called back, not moving from my chair. She appeared in the doorway, still beautiful despite everything. Auburn hair, green eyes, the kind of smile that had made me forget my own name when we met 12 years ago. Tonight, that smile looked like a lie wearing lipstick. You're up late, she said, kicking off her heels and trying to look casual. How was your day? Educational. I held up my phone. Want to see what I learned? The color drained from her face as she recognized the video. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The grandfather clock in the corner, another restoration project, ticked away the seconds of our marriage. Jack, I can explain. Really? Because I'm dying to hear how you explain this. I stood up, my 6-foot frame casting a shadow across the room. Years of construction work and boxing at Ray's gym had kept me in decent shape, and right now I felt every coiled muscle in my body begging for action. Were you researching architectural techniques? Studying load-bearing structures? Because it sure looked like you were studying how much weight a dorm room bed could handle. Don't be crude. Crude? I laughed, and it came out harsh and bitter. Lady, you just starred in Girls Gone Wild Mill Haven Edition, and you're worried about me being crude? Anne straightened her shoulders, shifting into the defensive posture I'd seen her use with difficult clients. It was a mistake. I was drunk, and things got out of hand, but it didn't mean anything. Bis. The word hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. You don't accidentally end up half naked in a menage a trois, Anne. That requires planning, coordination, the kind of attention to detail you usually reserve for blueprints. She flinched. It's not what it looked like. Then what was it? Performance art? A very hands-on architecture seminar? You don't understand the pressure I'm under at work. The new promotion. The expectations. So you decided to relieve stress by screwing college kids? I pulled out my phone again. Should I call your mother? I'm sure she'd love to see how her daughter handles workplace pressure. You wouldn't. Watch me. I started scrolling through my contacts, and Anne lunged forward, trying to grab the phone. I held it out of reach, and she stumbled, catching herself against the coffee table. Please, Jack, don't do this. We can work through it. Marriage counseling, whatever you want. What I want is a wife who doesn't moonlight as a campus entertainment committee. I pocketed the phone and looked at her. Really looked at her. For what felt like the first time in months. When did you become someone I don't recognize? I'm still me. No, you're not. The woman I married wouldn't do this. She had integrity, self-respect. She sure as hell wouldn't humiliate me in front of the entire town. Anne's facade finally cracked, and I saw a flash of the coldness that had been growing between us for months. Maybe the woman you married was tired of being taken for granted, tired of coming home to a husband who's given up on everything, including himself. Given up? I work 60 hours a week to pay for this house, your car, your designer clothes, and I make twice what you do, so don't act like you're supporting me. She crossed her arms, and there it was, the truth she'd been holding back. I'm the breadwinner, Jack. I'm the one with the career trajectory. Maybe it's time you accepted that. The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. Not because they weren't true, but because they were. Anne's promotion to senior architect had doubled her salary while I was still stuck in middle management at Morrison Engineering. Ironic, since the firm shared my name, but was founded by someone else's great-grandfather. So that gives you the right to cheat? It gives me the right to have a life outside this house, and your endless renovation projects, and your bitter commentary about everything. Bitter? I felt something cold and sharp settling in my chest like ice forming around my heart. You haven't seen bitter yet. I spent the rest of the night in the garage, not because I couldn't bear to be in the same bed as Anne, but because I was planning. By sunrise, I had a strategy that would have made Sun Tzu proud. First, I made coffee and breakfast like nothing had happened. Anne came downstairs at 7, showered, and dressed for work, probably hoping our fight had been some kind of stress-induced nightmare. We need to talk about last night, she said, pouring herself coffee from the pot I'd made, already handled. I buttered my toast with the calm precision of a man who'd found his purpose. I sent the video to your mother, your sister, and your boss. Also posted it on the neighborhood Facebook group with a caption about honesty and marriage. Anne dropped her coffee mug. It shattered against the kitchen tiles I'd installed myself, sending ceramic shards and hot coffee across the floor like shrapnel from an exploded relationship. You didn't. Check your phone. She did, and I watched her face go through the 5 stages of grief and fast forward. Denial melted into anger. Anger collapsed into bargaining. Bargaining dissolved into depression, and depression crystallized into a cold, hard acceptance of reality. You fool. Probably, but I'm an honest fool, which puts me one step ahead of you in the moral hierarchy. Her phone started buzzing. Text after text, call after call. The video had gone viral in our little corner of Ohio. And Anne Morrison, rising star of Henderson and Associates Architecture, was about to become infamous for all the wrong reasons. My career is ruined. Should have thought of that before you decided to major in extracurricular activities. I stood up and dumped my dishes in the sink. I'm going to work. When I get home tonight, I want you gone. Take whatever you can fit in your car. Everything else stays here. You can't just throw me out. This is my house too. Actually, it's not. I pulled a folder from the kitchen drawer and set it on the table. Deeds in my name only. Remember? You said your credit was tied up in that condo investment that never happened. Funny how that worked out. Anne stared at the papers like they might spontaneously combust. I put money into this place. The kitchen renovation, the bathroom, gifts to the homeowner. Very generous of you. I grabbed my work jacket and headed for the door. Don't forget to change your address with the post office. I left her standing in the kitchen, surrounded by broken ceramic and the ruins of her carefully constructed life. It should have felt satisfying, but mostly it just felt necessary, like lancing a wound that had been festering for months. Morrison Engineering occupied a converted warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and industrial lighting that was supposed to look trendy, but mostly just looked cheap. I'd been working there for 8 years, designing structural systems for buildings I couldn't afford to live in, and today felt like any other day except for the way conversations stopped when I walked past. Jack, my supervisor, Bill Henderson, no relation to Anne's firm despite the name, appeared at my cubicle around 10. Can we talk? His office was a glass box that offered all the privacy of a fishbowl. Bill closed the door and sat down across from me, his expression somewhere between sympathy and professional concern. I saw the video. Congratulations! You and half of Ohio. Look, I know this is a difficult time, but I need to ask, are you going to be able to focus on work? Because if you need some time off, I'm fine, Bill. Better than fine, actually. I feel like I just woke up from a 12-year coma. He studied my face, probably looking for signs of an impending breakdown. Okay, but if you need anything, my door's open. What I needed was for people to stop treating me like a sufferer. I wasn't the one who'd humiliated myself on camera. I wasn't the one whose professional reputation was currently circling the drain like bathwater. I was the wronged party here, and I intended to act like it. At lunch, I drove to Ray's boxing gym, a converted auto repair shop that smelled like sweat, leather, and broken dreams. Ray Kowalski had been my best friend since high school, back when we both thought we might make something of ourselves in the ring. Life had other plans, but Ray had managed to turn his passion into a business that barely kept him afloat. Heard about Anne, he said when I walked in. Ray was 52, built like a fire hydrant, and had the kind of face that had absorbed too many punches to ever look surprised by anything. Good news travels fast. Bad news travels faster. He tossed me a pair of gloves. You here to talk or you here to hit something? Both. The heavy bag felt good under my fists, each impact sending shockwaves up my arms and into my chest where that whole sharp thing had taken residence. I'd been boxing since I was 16 and my body remembered the rhythm even after months away from the gym. So what's the plan? Ray asked, holding the bag steady. Plan? Don't BS me, Jack. I've known you too long. You've got that look in your eyes, the same one you had before you knocked out Danny Kowalski in the Golden Gloves. Danny was your cousin. Danny was also a punk who had it coming, just like Anne. I stopped punching and looked at him. You think she had it coming? I think she's been treating you like crap for 2 years, and now everyone knows what kind of person she really is. Ray shrugged. Sometimes the truth hurts. Sometimes it's supposed to. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in months. I left work early, not because I was falling apart, but because I had research to do. If Anne wanted to play games, I was going to learn the rules. Anne's office was in the Henderson building, a gleaming monument to architectural excess that looked like someone had crossed a spaceship with a corporate headquarters. I parked across the street and waited, feeling like a private detective in a noir film, except with better dental coverage. At 3:30, Anne emerged with a man I didn't recognize. Tall, dark hair, expensive suit, the kind of confident strided that screamed Ivy League education and trust fund backup. He was older than the college boys from the video, maybe 40, with the kind of polished good looks that belonged in a cologne advertisement. They walked to his car, a silver Porsche that probably cost more than I made in 2 years, and drove off together. I followed at a distance, feeling ridiculous but also oddly focused. This was better than sitting at home feeling sorry for myself. They ended up at the Riverside Marriott, the nicest hotel in Millhaven, which wasn't saying much, but was still way above my pay grade. I watched them walk into the lobby like they owned the place, Anne's hand resting on his arm, with the casual closeness of people who'd done this before. So the college boys weren't a one-time thing. They were just the tip of the iceberg. I called my sister Tracy from the hotel parking lot. She managed Mickey's Tavern, the kind of blue-collar bar where secrets went to die and gossip was the primary currency. Jesus, Jack, I heard about the video. You okay? I'm fantastic. Listen, I need a favor. What do you know about Henderson and Associates? The architecture firm? Not much. Why? Anne's been working late a lot. I'm starting to think her overtime doesn't involve blueprints. Tracy was quiet for a moment. You want me to ask around? I want you to find out everything you can about Anne's work life. Who she's been seen with, where she goes after hours, anything that might explain how my wife turned into someone I don't recognize. Consider it done. But Jack, be careful. When you go looking for dirt, sometimes you find more than you bargained for. That evening, I sat in my empty house and made a list. Not a grocery list or a honey-do list, but an inventory of everything I knew about my wife's new life. The late nights that had started 6 months ago, the new clothes, the expensive haircuts, the way she'd started talking about networking events and client dinners, the way she'd stopped looking at me like I was someone she loved and started looking at me like I was someone she tolerated. My phone rang at 9 o'clock. Tracy, you're not going to like this. I already don't like it. Tell me anyway. Your wife's been a regular at the Marriott bar for months, always with the same guy, Derek Hoffman, junior partner at her firm. Word is, they've been working on more than just building designs. Derek Hoffman. I wrote the name down, along with everything else as Tracy told me. The cozy dinners, the weekend business trips, the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. There's more, Tracy continued. Anne's best friend Melissa has been covering for her, telling people Anne was with her when she was really with this Derek guy. They've got a whole system worked out. Melissa Chen, Anne's college roommate, maid of honor at our wedding, the woman who'd been coming to our house for dinner every month for the past decade. Another name for my list. How long has this been going on? Best guess, since Anne got her promotion. Maybe longer. I thanked Tracy and hung up, then sat in my living room, staring at the walls I'd painted, the floors I'd refinished, the crown molding I'd installed with my own hands. Everything in this house was a monument to the life I thought I was building. Now it felt like a mausoleum. But I wasn't dead yet. And neither was my capacity for creative problem solving. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the Henderson building. Not to confront anyone, but to observe. I wanted to understand the ecosystem that had produced this new version of my wife. The lobby was all marble and glass, with a directory that listed Henderson & Associates on floors 12 through 15. I took the elevator up to 12 and walked around like I belonged there, noting the layout, the security cameras, the way people moved through the space. Derek Hoffman's office was on 14, with a nameplate that identified him as Associate Partner, Commercial Design. Through the glass walls, I could see him at his desk, talking on the phone with the kind of animated gestures that suggested he was closing a deal or impressing a client. He looked younger than he had from a distance, maybe 35, with the kind of boyish features that probably made clients trust him with their million-dollar projects. I wondered if Anne was just another project to him, or if he actually thought he was in love. Not that it mattered. Either way, he was about to learn that actions have consequences. I spent the rest of the morning at the public library using their computers to research Derek Hoffman. Social media profiles, professional background, anything that might give me leverage. What I found was a man who'd built his career on his ability to charm clients and close deals. Someone who understood that success was as much about perception as performance. Perfect. Men like Derek lived in glass houses, which made them vulnerable to people who weren't afraid to throw stones. That afternoon, I went shopping. Not for groceries or household supplies, but for the tools of psychological warfare. A decent camera with a telephoto lens, a small digital recorder, a prepaid phone that couldn't be traced back to me. If Anna and Derek wanted to play games, I was going to change the rules. I started with surveillance, following Derek after work to see where he went and who he talked to. The man was a creature of habit. Gym at 6, dinner at one of 3 upscale restaurants, home to his downtown condo by 9. Weekends were for golf at the country club and drinks with other young professionals who thought they were masters of the universe. The routine made him predictable, and predictability was a weakness I could exploit. On Thursday, I followed him to Chez Laurent, the kind of French restaurant where the portions were small and the prices were astronomical. He was dining with a middle-aged couple who looked like money. Potential clients, probably, based on the way Derek was leaning forward and gesturing enthusiastically. I sat at the bar and ordered a beer, keeping one eye on Derek's table while pretending to watch the basketball game on the overhead TV. The couple seemed impressed with whatever Derek was selling, nodding and smiling as he showed them something on his tablet. When they got up to leave, I was ready. I followed them to the parking lot and struck up a conversation as they waited for the valet to bring their car. "Excuse me, but weren't you just talking to Derek Hoffman? I work with him at Henderson & Associates." The man, silver-haired and wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, smiled politely. "Yes, we're considering him for a project." "Do you know Derek well?" "Oh, we're close. In fact, I was just at his bachelor party last weekend. Wild night. Derek really knows how to celebrate. The woman looked confused. Bachelor party? But he told us he was single. Well, technically he is. The wedding isn't until next month. But you know how it is. He's been living with his fiancée for so long, they're practically married already. I watched the doubt creep into their eyes, the way people look when they realize they might have been lied to. His fiancée? He mentioned he was focused entirely on his career right now. Anne's very understanding about his work schedule. She has to be, with all the late nights and weekend trips. I shrugged like it was no big deal. Anyway, I hope the project works out. Derek's a great guy, very dedicated to his relationships. The valet brought their car, and they drove away looking like people who were going to be having a serious conversation about Derek Hoffman's credibility. I felt a small, cold satisfaction watching their taillights disappear into the night. One seed of doubt planted. Many more to go. By Friday, I had a system. Wake up early, go to work, leave at lunch to conduct surveillance, return to finish my day, then spend my evenings gathering intelligence. It was exhausting, but it was also the most focused I'd felt in years. Tracy called me that afternoon with an update. Your wife's been busy. She and Derek had lunch at the Marriott yesterday, and according to my sources, they weren't discussing floor plans. Define not discussing floor plans. Let's just say the waitress needed therapy after seeing what they were doing in that corner booth. I added it to my growing file of evidence. Not because I was planning to use it in divorce proceedings. Ohio was a no-fault state, so Anne's infidelity wouldn't affect the settlement. But because information was power, and I was building an arsenal. There's something else, Tracy continued. Melissa Chen's been asking around about you. Wants to know if you're planning to do anything stupid. Define stupid. Her words were anything that might hurt Anne's career. I laughed, and it came out darker than I'd intended. Anne hurt her own career the moment she decided to star in that video. I'm just making sure people know about it. Jack, be careful. Melissa's got connections all over town. Her family owns half the restaurants downtown, and her ex-husband's a lawyer. Good to know. That weekend, I put my plan into motion. I started with Derek's golf buddies at the country club, striking up conversations at the 19th hole about marriage, fidelity, and the importance of honesty in business relationships. I didn't mention Derek by name. I didn't have to. I just planted seeds and let them grow. You know what I respect about a man? I said to a group of golfers who were complaining about their wives. When he's honest about his commitments. When he says he's single, he's single. When he says he's taken. None of this having it both ways BS. The men nodded and murmured agreement, the way men do when they're talking about abstract principles that don't apply to their own lives. But I could see them filing the information away, adding it to their mental databases of who could be trusted and who couldn't. Sunday morning, I attended the early service at St. Matthew's Episcopal, where Anne and I had been married 12 years ago. I hadn't been to church in months, but I knew Anne's mother would be there, along with half the social circle that had watched our relationship bloom and flourish. I sat in the back and let people come to me, accepting their condolences and support with the gracious dignity of a man who'd been wronged but wasn't bitter about it. I'm so sorry about what happened, Jack, said Mrs. Patterson, who lived 3 houses down from us. Anne always seemed like such a nice girl. She is a nice girl, I replied, my voice heavy with the kind of sadness that made people want to comfort me. I think she just lost her way. Sometimes people change and there's nothing you can do about it. Still, what she did was inexcusable. I'm trying not to judge her too harshly. We all make mistakes. I paused, letting the weight of my forgiveness settle over the conversation. I just hope she finds whatever she's looking for. It was a masterful performance, if I did say so myself. By the time I left church, half the congregation was talking about what a saint I was being, about the whole situation, and how Anne Morrison had thrown away the best man she'd ever find. The other half was probably wondering what other secrets Anne might be hiding. Monday morning brought the first real test of my strategy. Anne called me at work, her voice tight with stress and barely controlled anger. We need to talk. I'm listening, not on the phone. Meet me for lunch at Romano's. Romano's was a small Italian place downtown, the kind of restaurant where you could have a private conversation without being overheard. It was also public enough that Anne wouldn't be able to make a scene without embarrassing herself further. I arrived first and chose a table in the back, positioning myself so I could see the entire restaurant. Anne walked in 10 minutes later, looking like she'd aged 5 years in the past week. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes, and her usual confident stride had been replaced by something more cautious. "You look terrible," I said as she sat down. "Thanks to you." She ordered coffee from the waitress, her hand shaking slightly as she reached for the menu. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Enlightened people about your extracurricular activities? You've destroyed my reputation, my career, my relationships with my family. I didn't destroy anything, Anne. I just shared some information. You were the one who chose to star in that video." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Derek's biggest client just fired him. The Riverside Development Project, 2 years of work, gone. They said they couldn't trust someone who lies about his personal life to be honest about their business." I felt that cold satisfaction again, like ice water flowing through my veins. "That's unfortunate. It's not just Derek. My mother won't speak to me. My sister thinks I'm having a breakdown. Half my friends won't return my calls. The other half are asking if the rumors about me and Derek are true." "Are they?" Anne stared at me across the table, and for a moment I saw a flash of the woman I'd married, vulnerable, uncertain, looking for someone to tell her everything would be okay. Then her expression hardened into something I didn't recognize. "You want the truth, Jack? Fine. Yes, Derek and I are involved. Yes, we've been seeing each other for months. And yes, I'm probably going to leave you for him." "Probably? Definitely. This marriage has been over for years. You know it, I know it, and now everyone else knows it too." I nodded slowly, like I was processing this information for the first time. "So the college boys were what, a job interview?" "The college boys were a mistake, a drunken, stupid mistake that I regret. But not Derek. Not Derek." She straightened her shoulders, finding some reserve of defiance. "Derek understands me. He appreciates my ambition, my intelligence, my potential. He doesn't make me feel like I should apologize for being successful." "I never asked you to apologize for being successful. You didn't have to. It was written all over your face every time I got promoted, every time I brought home a bigger paycheck, every time I accomplished something you couldn't." The words hit their target, but instead of pain, I felt something else, a crystalline clarity that cut through months of confusion and self-doubt. "You're right," I said. "I was threatened by your success. I was jealous, insecure, and probably not the husband you deserved." Anne blinked, clearly not expecting this response. "But here's the thing," I continued. "Being a crappy husband doesn't give you the right to be a cheating wife. If you were unhappy, you should have talked to me. If you wanted a divorce, you should have asked for one. Instead, you decided to humiliate me in front of the entire town. I never meant for that video to get out, but it did, and now we both have to live with the consequences." I stood up and dropped a 20 on the table. "Enjoy your new life with Derek. I hope it's everything you think it will be." I was halfway to the door when she called after me. "Jack, wait." I turned back and she was standing beside the table, looking smaller somehow. "What happens now?" Now, you find out what it's like to live in a town where everyone knows your business." I smiled, and it felt like baring my teeth. "Welcome to my world, Anne. Population, you." That afternoon, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. I called Derek Hoffman's office and scheduled an appointment. "I'm interested in discussing a potential project," I told his secretary. "Residential renovation, significant budget." The appointment was set for Thursday at 2 o'clock. 3 days to prepare for a conversation that would determine the trajectory of the rest of my life. I spent those 3 days gathering intelligence about Derek's business practices, his client relationships, and his professional vulnerabilities. What I found was a man who'd built his success on charm and connections rather than talent or integrity, exactly the kind of person who would crumble under sustained pressure. Thursday arrived gray and cold, typical October weather in Ohio. I dressed carefully, my best suit, conservative tie, the kind of outfit that suggested serious money and serious intentions. I wanted Derek to see me as a potential client, not a cuckolded husband seeking revenge. The Henderson Building's lobby was busy with the usual mix of professionals and visitors. I rode the elevator to the 14th floor, announced myself to the receptionist, and waited in a conference room that overlooked downtown Millhaven's modest skyline. Derek entered at exactly 2 o'clock, extending his hand with a smile that probably cost his parents $50,000 in orthodontic work. Mr. Morrison, pleasure to meet you. I understand you're interested in a renovation project. That's right. I shook his hand, noting the soft palm and manicured nails of a man who'd never done manual labor. Victorian house on Elm Street. Significant historical value, but it needs updating to meet modern standards. Derek's eyes lit up with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested dollar signs. Sounds fascinating. Tell me about your vision for the space. For the next 20 minutes, I described my house in detail, the layout, the architectural features, the potential for expansion. I talked about budgets and timelines, about my desire to create something that would be both historically accurate and functionally modern. Derek took notes, asked intelligent questions, and gradually relaxed into the kind of easy confidence that came from dealing with wealthy clients who appreciated his expertise. I think we could create something really special, he said finally. When would you like to start? That depends. On what? On whether you can be trusted to complete the project. I leaned back in my chair and studied his face. I've heard some concerning rumors about your professional integrity. Derek's smile faltered slightly. I'm not sure what you mean. I mean the rumors about your personal life affecting your business relationships. The Riverside development situation, for example. Now Derek's face went pale. I don't know what you've heard, but I've heard that you've been lying to clients about your relationship status, that you've been conducting an affair with a married woman while telling potential clients that you're single and focused entirely on your career. Derek stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward. I think this meeting is over. Sit down, Derek. My voice carried the kind of authority I'd learned from years of managing construction crews. We're not finished talking. I don't know who you are, but I'm Jack Morrison, Ann Morrison's husband. I watched the recognition dawn in his eyes, followed quickly by fear. The man whose wife you've been screwing for the past 6 months. Derek's legs gave out and he collapsed back into his chair. Oh, crap. Oh, crap is right. I leaned forward, invading his personal space. See, Derek, I know all about you. I know where you live, where you work out, where you eat dinner. I know about your golf game and your trust fund and your daddy's connections that got you this job. What do you want? I want you to understand something very clearly. My wife made a choice, and now she's going to live with the consequences. But you're collateral damage, an innocent bystander who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I never meant for any of this to happen, but it did happen. And now everyone in town knows that Derek Hoffman is the kind of man who sleeps with other people's wives. I smiled, and Derek flinched like I'd hit him. How do you think that's going to affect your business, your reputation, your ability to look your clients in the eye and tell them they can trust you? Derek's hands were shaking now. You can't do this to me. I'll call the police. And tell them what? That I scheduled a business meeting and hurt your feelings? I laughed. Good luck with that. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street below where people were going about their normal lives, unaware of the drama playing out 14 floors above them. Here's what's going to happen, Derek. You're going to end your relationship with my wife. You're going to transfer to another office, preferably in another state. And you're going to pray that I don't decide to share what I know about your business practices with your remaining clients. You can't make me do anything. I turned back to face him, and something in my expression made him shrink back in his chair. Watch me. The next few weeks passed in a blur of carefully orchestrated chaos. Derek, true to his character, tried to tough it out at first. He stayed in town, continued his relationship with Anne, and attempted to rebuild his professional reputation through a combination of charm and damage control. Didn't work. I'd underestimated the power of small-town gossip and overestimated Derek's ability to withstand sustained social pressure. Within 2 weeks, he'd lost 3 more clients and been asked to take a leave of absence from Henderson and Associates while the partners evaluated the situation. Anne, meanwhile, was discovering that infidelity came with a social cost she hadn't anticipated. The video had made her a minor celebrity in Millhaven, but not the kind of celebrity anyone wanted to be. Invitations stopped coming. Phone calls went unreturned, and the professional network she'd spent years building began to distance itself from the scandal. I watched it all unfold with the detached interest of a scientist observing an experiment. This was what happened when people chose immediate gratification over long-term consequences. This was what happened when you forgot that actions had ripple effects that extended far beyond the initial moment of decision. On a Tuesday in late October, Tracy called me with news that would change everything. Derek's leaving town. Where's he going? Phoenix. Got a job with some firm out there. Starts next month. Tracy paused. Word is, Anne's going with him. I felt something shift inside me, like a gear clicking into place. When? This weekend, maybe sooner. They've been packing up his condo, and Anne's been staying there, instead of, well, wherever she's been staying since you kicked her out. Thanks for the heads up. Jack, what are you going to do? I'm going to say goodbye. That evening, I drove to Derek's condo, a modern glass box in the gentrified warehouse district that looked like every other upscale development in every other mid-sized American city. I parked across the street and waited, watching the windows for signs of life. At 8:30, Anne appeared on the balcony, talking on her phone while Derek moved around inside while packing boxes. They looked like any other couple preparing for a big move, excited about their new adventure and the fresh start it represented. I got out of my car and walked to the building's entrance, where a security system required residents to buzz visitors in. I pressed Derek's button and waited. Yes? His voice crackled through the intercom. It's Jack Morrison. I think we should talk. A long pause. Go away, Jack. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to say goodbye to my wife. Another pause, then the sound of the door unlocking. I took the elevator to the 8th floor and found Derek waiting in his doorway, looking like a man who was trying to decide between fight and flight. 5 minutes, he said. That's all I need. Anne was in the living room, surrounded by boxes and the detritus of a life being hastily packed. She looked up when I entered, her expression cycling through surprise, anger, and something that might have been guilt. What do you want, Jack? To see if you're happy. The question seemed to catch her off guard. What? Are you happy? Is this what you wanted? I gestured around the room, taking in the boxes, the bare walls, the sense of impermanence that hung over everything. Running away to Arizona with a man you barely know? I'm not running away, I'm starting over. Same thing, different words. I sat down on Derek's expensive couch, uninvited. Tell me something, Anne. When you were growing up, is this how you imagined your life would turn out? Sneaking around, lying to people who cared about you, leaving town in the middle of the night like some kind of criminal. I don't have to listen to this. No, you don't. But maybe you should. I looked around the condo, noting the expensive furniture, the abstract art, the complete lack of personal touches that suggested a real life being lived. This place looks like a hotel room. Is that what you want? A life that could be anyone's life, in a place that could be anywhere? Derek stepped into the room, positioning himself protectively near Anne. I think you should leave. In a minute. I kept my eyes on Anne. Do you remember our first apartment? That studio above the bakery on Main Street? It was tiny. The plumbing was terrible, and the neighbors upstairs fought every night. But it was ours. We painted the walls ourselves, bought furniture at garage sales, made it into something that mattered. That was a long time ago. 12 years. Not that long, in the grand scheme of things. I stood up and both Anne and Derek tensed. I keep thinking about what you said at lunch, about how this marriage has been over for years. Maybe you're right. Maybe we stopped seeing each other somewhere along the way. Jack, but here's what I don't understand. If you were so unhappy, why didn't you just leave? Why the cheating, the lies, the public humiliation? Why did you have to burn everything down? Anne's composure finally cracked, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. Because I was scared. Of what? Of being alone, of starting over, of admitting that I'd wasted 12 years of my life on something that wasn't working. So instead you decided to waste 12 years of my life too. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had burned out long ago. Derek cleared his throat, trying to break the tension. Look, Jack, I know this is difficult, but Anne and I are going to be very happy together, I finished. I'm sure you are. You're both getting exactly what you deserve. I walked to the door, then turned back for one final look at the woman I'd married and the life we'd built together. Goodbye, Anne. I hope Arizona is everything you think it will be. They left town on a Thursday morning in November. Derek's Porsche loaded with suitcases and the remnants of their Mill Haven lives. I didn't watch them go, but Tracy called to confirm their departure, her voice carrying a mixture of satisfaction and concern. "You okay?" "I'm perfect." And I was. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like myself again. Not the bitter, diminished version of Jack Morrison who'd been slowly suffocating in a marriage that had died without anyone bothering to hold a funeral, but the original model, the man who'd once thought he could build something that mattered with his own two hands. I spent that weekend cleaning house, literally and figuratively. Anne's remaining belongings went into boxes that I donated to charity. Her books, her clothes, her collection of architectural magazines, all of it disappeared like it had never existed. I repainted the bedroom, rearranged the furniture, and turned her home office into a workshop where I could build things instead of just fixing them. By Sunday night, the house looked like it belonged to a man who lived alone by choice rather than circumstance. Monday morning brought a surprise visitor. Bill Henderson knocked on my door at 7 a.m., looking uncomfortable, in the way that suggested he was about to deliver news he didn't want to share. "Jack, we need to talk." I invited him in and made coffee while he sat at my kitchen table, staring at the walls like he was trying to memorize them. "I heard about Anne leaving town. News travels fast. It does in a place like this." Bill accepted the coffee I offered, wrapping his hands around the mug like he was trying to warm himself. "Look, I'm going to be direct. There's been talk about your situation. Some of the clients are concerned about the company's reputation." "My situation?" "The video, the public nature of your divorce, the way you've been handling things." I felt that familiar cold sharpness in my chest, but this time it was accompanied by something else, a kind of crystalline amusement at the absurdity of it all. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly. My wife cheats on me, humiliates me in front of the entire town, and now I'm the one with the reputation problem?" "It's not about right or wrong, Jack. It's about perception." "Whose perception?" "The Riverside Development Group, for starters. They're concerned about being associated with drama." I laughed, and Bill flinched like I'd slapped him. "The Riverside Development Group? The same company that fired Derek Hoffman for lying to them? That's different. How is it different?" Bill shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Derek was the one who was dishonest. You're the one who exposed the dishonesty. So honesty is bad for business now?" "Public scandals are bad for business. Always." I nodded slowly, understanding finally dawning. "You're firing me. I'm asking you to consider taking some time off. Let things cool down. Maybe transfer to our Columbus office." "No. Jack, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. Reasonable people don't get punished for being the sufferers of other people's bad behavior." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where I'd lived for 5 years. "But you know what? You're right about one thing. This town does love its drama, and I've been providing plenty of it lately. So you'll consider the transfer?" "I'll consider a lot of things." I turned back to face him, and something in my expression made him lean away from me. "Tell me something, Bill. How long have you known about Anne and Derek?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, when did you first hear the rumors? When did you first suspect that my wife was sleeping with someone from Henderson and Associates?" Bill's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. This is a small town, Bill. People talk. They've been talking for months." I sat back down across from him, invading his personal space. "So when you found out that one of your employees was being made a fool of by his cheating wife, what did you do? Did you warn me? Did you give me a heads up that my marriage was falling apart?" "That's not my place." "Or did you just sit back and wait to see how it would all play out? Maybe place a few bets on whether I'd figure it out on my own?" "Jack, you're being paranoid." "Am I? Or am I finally seeing things clearly?" I leaned back in my chair, studying his face, and you know what I think, Bill? I think you knew exactly what was happening. I think half the town knew. And I think everyone was just waiting to see how long it would take for stupid Jack Morrison to catch on. That's not true, isn't it? I smiled, and Bill flinched again. Well, congratulations. The show's over. Jack Morrison finally figured out that his wife was a cheating hoe, and his friends were spineless cowards who were more interested in gossip than loyalty. Bill stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. No, you don't. But you're going to anyway, because I'm not finished. I remained seated, forcing him to look down at me. See, Bill, you're right about one thing. Public scandals are bad for business, and I've learned a lot about creating public scandals over the past few weeks. What's that supposed to mean? It means that if you fire me or transfer me, or do anything else to punish me for being the sufferer of my wife's infidelity, I'm going to make your life very interesting." I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. I've got video of Derek Hoffman admitting to his affair with Anne. I've got recordings of conversations with people who knew about it for months. I've got a whole file of evidence about who knew what and when they knew it. Bill stared at the phone like it might explode. "You're bluffing." "Am I? You want to find out?" I put the phone away and stood up, using my height advantage to loom over him. "Here's what's going to happen, Bill. I'm going to keep my job, my salary, and my benefits. I'm going to come to work every day and do my job to the best of my ability. And you're going to treat me with the same respect you'd show any other employee who hasn't done anything wrong. And if I don't, then everyone in town is going to find out exactly who knew about Anne's affair and chose to keep quiet about it. They're going to learn about the culture of mayhem and backstabbing that you've allowed to flourish at Morrison Engineering. They're going to discover that the company that bears my family name has been treating me like entertainment instead of an employee." Bill's hands were shaking now. "You can't do this. Watch me." I walked to the front door and held it open. "Thanks for stopping by, Bill. See you at work tomorrow." He left without another word, and I watched him drive away with the satisfaction of a man who'd just discovered that he had more power than he'd realized. The rest of November passed quietly. I went to work, did my job, and came home to a house that felt more like home than it had in years. Bill Henderson treated me with the wary respect of a man who'd learned not to underestimate his employees, and my coworkers gradually stopped treating me like a sufferer and started treating me like a survivor. Derek and Anne's departure had created a vacuum in Millhaven's gossip ecosystem, and nature abhors a vacuum. New scandals emerged to fill the void. A city councilman caught embezzling parking meter revenue. A high school principal discovered to be having an affair with a parent volunteer. The usual parade of human weakness and poor judgment that kept small towns entertained. I found myself oddly grateful to be yesterday's news. On a Friday evening in early December, I was working in my new workshop when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Melissa Chen standing on my porch, looking nervous and determined in equal measure. "Hello, Jack." "Melissa." I didn't invite her in. "What can I do for you?" "I wanted to talk to you about Anne. Anne's in Arizona." "You want to talk to her? I suggest you call her." "I tried. She won't speak to me." Melissa shifted her weight from foot to foot, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, can I come in? It's cold out here." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let her enter. Melissa had been a fixture in our lives for so long that her presence in my living room felt almost normal, despite everything that had happened. "Nice job with the redecorating," she said, looking around at the changes I'd made. "Thanks. What do you want, Melissa?" She sat down on my couch without being invited, a presumption that would have annoyed me a month ago, but now just seemed pathetic. "I want to explain my part in all this. Your part was covering for Anne while she cheated on me. What's to explain?" "It's more complicated than that." "Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks pretty simple. Anne asked you to lie for her, and you did." Melissa looked down at her hands, and I noticed she was wearing her wedding ring again. Her divorce from her lawyer husband had been finalized 2 years ago, but apparently she'd decided to accessorize with false hope. "Anne was unhappy, Jack. She had been for a long time. So you helped her cheat instead of helping her communicate." "I helped her figure out what she wanted, by lying to everyone who cared about her, by giving her space to explore her options." Melissa looked up at me, and I saw something desperate in her eyes. "You don't understand what it's like to feel trapped in a life that's slowly suffocating you." "Actually, I do. The difference is that when I felt trapped, I didn't decide to blow up everyone else's life to escape." "You're being unfair." "Am I?" I sat down across from her, maintaining the distance between us. "Tell me something, Melissa. How long have you been in love with Anne?" The question hit its target. Melissa's face went white, then red, then settled into a kind of resigned defeat. "It's not like that." "Isn't it? You've been single for 2 years, but you spend all your time with a married woman. You cover for her affairs, encourage her to leave her husband, and now you're here trying to convince me that it was all for her own good." I leaned forward, studying her face. "How long, Melissa?" "Since college." The words came out in a whisper. "Since before she met you. And you thought that if you helped her destroy her marriage, she'd finally notice you. I thought she deserved better than a husband who took her for granted. What you thought was that you deserved a chance with a woman who was never going to love you the way you wanted her to." Melissa started crying then. the kind of ugly, desperate tears that come from years of suppressed hope and disappointment. I watched her fall apart in my living room and felt nothing but a distant kind of pity. She's not coming back, I said finally. Anne's not the kind of person who looks backward. She's found her new life, her new identity, her new source of validation. You're part of the old life now, which means you're irrelevant. You don't know that. I know Anne better than you do, apparently. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the December darkness. She's not going to call you back, Melissa. She's not going to invite you to visit. She's not going to maintain a friendship with someone who reminds her of the life she left behind. You're wrong. Emma, when's the last time you heard from her? Melissa didn't answer, which was answer enough. You destroyed your friendship with me, alienated half our social circle, and participated in the humiliation of someone who never did anything to hurt you, I continued. And for what? For a woman who's probably already forgotten your name? I should go. Melissa stood up, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Yeah, you should. I walked her to the door, then stopped with my hand on the knob. Melissa? Next time you fall in love with someone, try falling in love with someone who's actually available. It'll save everyone a lot of trouble. She left without another word, and I watched her drive away with the same detached satisfaction I'd felt watching Derek's car disappear into the distance. Another loose end tied off, another chapter of my old life officially closed. Epilogue. 6 months later, spring came early to Millhaven that year, and with it came a sense of renewal that felt almost biblical. I'd spent the winter months working on my house, my career, and myself, and by April I was starting to feel like a man who'd survived something catastrophic and come out stronger on the other side. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday, signed by Anne and postmarked from Phoenix. No note, no explanation, just the legal documentation of a marriage that had died long before either of us had the courage to admit it. I signed them that evening and mailed them back the next day, officially ending 12 years of shared history. It should have felt momentous, but mostly it just felt like paperwork. Ray called me that weekend with news that would have devastated me 6 months earlier, but now it just made me laugh. Heard from Tommy Chen's kid again. Apparently your ex-wife's been making the rounds in Phoenix. Define making the rounds. Derek caught her with some guy from her new job. Big fight, lots of drama. Neighbors called the cops. And Derek moved out. Word is he's headed back east, tail between his legs. I absorbed this information with the emotional detachment of someone reading about strangers in a newspaper. Anne's capacity for self-destruction was no longer my problem, and Derek's discovery that cheaters tend to cheat was a lesson he'd have to learn on his own. Thanks for the update. You okay with all this? Ray, I haven't been this okay in years. And it was true. The man who'd answered his phone to watch a video of his wife's infidelity 8 months ago was gone, replaced by someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more self-aware. I'd learned that I could survive betrayal, humiliation, and the complete destruction of everything I'd thought I wanted. More importantly, I'd learned that I could fight back. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a beer and my phone, scrolling through social media posts from people whose lives had moved on to new dramas, new scandals, new sources of entertainment. Anne's name had faded from the local gossip mill, replaced by fresher stories of human weakness and poor judgment. I thought about calling her, just to see how she was handling her new reality. Then I thought better of it. Anne Morrison, or whatever she was calling herself now, was no longer my responsibility, my problem, or my concern. Instead, I called Tracy. Hey, Jack, what's up? Nothing much, just sitting here thinking about how quiet it's been lately. Quiet's good. Quiet means you're not the center of everyone else's entertainment. True. I took a sip of beer and watched the sun set over Millhaven's modest skyline. You know what the funny thing is? What's that? I used to think that the worst thing that could happen to me was having my marriage fall apart in public. Turns out it was the best thing that could have happened. How do you figure? Because it taught me who I really am when everything else gets stripped away. Turns out I'm someone who can take a punch and punch back twice as hard. Tracy was quiet for a moment. You sound different, Jack. Harder. Good different or bad different? Just different. Like you finally figured out something the rest of us are still working on. After we hung up, I sat on my porch until the stars came out, thinking about the man I'd been and the man I'd become. The old Jack Morrison had been someone who built things, houses, relationships, a life based on trust and mutual respect. He'd been naive enough to believe that good intentions and hard work were enough to protect the things he cared about. The new Jack Morrison knew better. He understood that the world was full of people who would take advantage of kindness, mistake forgiveness for weakness, and destroy beautiful things just because they could. But he also understood that knowledge was power, and that power could be used to protect yourself and punish those who tried to hurt you. Anne and Derek had taught me that lesson, though probably not in the way they'd intended. They'd shown me that nice guys don't always finish last. Sometimes they just finish differently than everyone expects. I finished my beer and went inside, locking the door behind me. Tomorrow was a new day in a life that belonged entirely to me, and I had plans to make. Big plans. The kind of plans that would have scared the old Jack Morrison, but excited the new one. After all, I'd learned something valuable over the past 8 months. When someone burns down your life, you don't have to rise from the ashes as the same person you were before. Sometimes you get to rise as someone much more dangerous. I smiled in the darkness of my empty house, and for the first time in years, it felt like the smile of a man who was exactly where he was supposed to be.